Hello, everyone. Welcome to Channel 781 News and welcome back to us. It's been a while, but we're going to try to cover a bit of ground based on what's been happening recently in the city. This is being recorded on August 28th, 2025. And here today to discuss the city's issues for 781 News is myself, Tom Benavides, Jamie Kirkellis,
Hello, hello.
and then Saul Blumenthal.
Hi.
Jamie, do you want to start the discussion with the trans sanctuary city policy that the Waltham Trans Alliance put in front of City Council earlier this year?
Be happy to. So to try to sort of summarize, we passed the Welcoming City resolution for trans people, a follow-up to the Welcoming City for immigrants in 2017. The city council says that they're sort of standing up for trans people, passing this. It got passed by 15-1. It sounds good, but if the whole story is sort of a little bit more uh, elaborate. It started off with sort of an ask to Waltham Trans Alliance, of which I'm a member, about sort of what can we do from our city councilor. And our ask was pretty simple. It was to submit a sanctuary city resolution using Worcester as a model, get it in on time so councilors could sign on it. That was basically it. And the point was to have a symbolic resolution, but important. Instead, it showed up at 10 a.m., sort of the day of the meeting, as a late file, which was not ideal. I mean, they understand there are extenuating circumstances, but the outcome is the outcome. It meant the whole night ended up being about the process, about the lateness, and about sort of everyone having to recess to read the edited 4 words on the document again. The actual point about protecting trans people kind of got buried under all of the sort of bicker and that was the result of basically a unforced error. The word games were sort of the next thing, and that's the swapping of sanctuary for welcoming. And the same word sanctuary was used by Boston, Worcester, Cambridge, Northampton, Pittsfield, all of which had passed non-binding resolutions, purely symbolic, but meant to stand together and to sort of send a message that the city is safe and that we stand with trans people. And that's the point, is the solidarity, having all the cities doing the same sort of thing. And instead, Waltham had to be different. Um, and they sort of sanded it down to make it a welcoming city, which is the same thing that they did in 2017 for the immigrant resolution as well. And it kind of undercuts the point of having sort of a bold stance if you're sort of pre-censoring yourself. Again, the kicker is this is like a resolution. There's no legal teeth and it changes nothing on the ground. It's all words. So the only real power was using calling it what it was. And there's a lot of a few councilors sort of had to get their word in about how, this says we can't comply with the feds. So are we sure that we're legally protected passing this non-binding resolution? So that was kind of, they had to be reminded in the chamber after spending a bunch of time in recess rereading it. Just the usual council theater. So one of the sort of more egregious points was that made by Councilor at Large Kathy McMiniman when she voted in opposition to the resolution, stating that Waltham's immigrant welcoming city resolution years earlier had sort of provoked federal scrutiny and bad press, and was sort of citing that as like a reason why we're having ICE raids now, as opposed to like, the overall desire of the administration to ethnically cleanse our neighborhoods of people that they don't like.
The maker of the resolution decided on her own to change the language from sanctuary to what's the word? Welcoming. I'm not sure where that fits in here or which words are going to be changed. Thank you for that, Counselor. Which words are going to be changed. But my concern is, with all the length of this, that in our agreement to support Waltham as a welcoming community for this population, that we are not creating a situation, as we have seen, the council's been involved in it herself, with the immigrant community. And the immigrant community apparently has been under tremendous issue in the last 2 weeks. I've seen it on social media. I've seen it on the television, Channel 4. I think the council's on Channel 4. And all of that issue was attributable to the city of Waltham, and what a terrible situation this city projected across the Commonwealth in terms of what went on here. Now, I don't know if this resolution is or is not going to trigger something to that effect. And I really do think that this council needs to get some legal support and say, certainly, you can go right ahead with the change of the language. You can go right ahead and support that. There will be no repercussions and no consequences to the city. That's a big concern I have.
So anyway, her remarks treated the city's reputation as what was really being harmed in that situation, not the families being targeted or the communities terrorized. And that same sort of framing shift is sort of putting the blame on residents for speaking out about this and saying, oh, if we do something in solidarity, maybe we'll provoke federal response.
Yeah, and no surprise that this concern with the trans sanctuary resolution was coming from Kathy McMiniman. No surprise that she voted against it. She is not, I don't think she's not secretly one of the most conservative, if not the most conservative member of city council in a sort of culture war kind of way. She's rambled on about how Donald Trump's right about Dems trying to eradicate the suburbs, destroy way of life.
It's one of those things where it's she's always the voice of reason to sort of speak up and complain about things getting addressed properly, I guess.
Yeah, and the fact that much of the concern and the halting and the distraction from this was a matter of procedure is because Kathy McMiniman is very good at bringing up procedure. When she talks about bad press, it's also known that when she's talking about bad press, she's talking about her far right Newsmax information diet kind of bad press. But I do think it is worth saying though that the reason why the blue state ICE raids have been so high profile is because blue states and cities with sanctuary policies have been resisting ICE raids on the immigrant front of things, and as a result, undocumented and immigrants of all kinds, all forms of legal status, are less likely to be abducted in blue states relative to red states so far this year. And it's because, resisting makes the news, but resisting also slows down ICE's work. And blue states are a relatively safer place to be for immigrants right now, as opposed to red states, because there are organizations like FERZA on the ground making ICE's work harder, slowing down their work, because these sanctuary city policies have forced the federal government to do all this theater, because they're forced to do theater instead of making actual quote unquote progress on actually ethnically cleansing our neighborhoods. Sanctuary city policy is any form of resistance and solidarity. It doesn't always feel like it solves the problem, but it does help. It does make a difference so much more than just rolling over. That's true for ICE raids, and as the federal government and the right-wing Republicans accelerate their attacks on trans and non-binary and gender diverse people, I think it's also going to be true for that as well. There is strength in solidarity. It's not just a feeling. It is it shows up in the numbers and the effects on real people who live here.
And it does have an effect on real people. In just this last 6 months in Waltham Trans Alliance, we've had several members literally move out of the country entirely rather than risk what's going to potentially happen, and even in a blue state. At the end of the day, this whole sort of process was sort of more about having a conversation, about having an actual what will we do if the feds come knocking. And the problem that we saw was that because it was filed late, because there was a discussion about all of the things surrounding the resolution itself, the actual contents didn't get much discussion. And it didn't help that it was on council committee council night, so it was crammed in the middle. It did help that that meant that they got to get read the same night, but it definitely didn't make it easier on the people who showed up in support to want to stick through the whole thing.
But importantly, the headline is still, despite all this disappointment and it's not ideal, still did pass with watered down language, 12 to 1. Was everyone there 50 to 1?
I believe.
Yeah, everyone except McMiniman voted in favor.
So Waltham Trans Alliance is working on publishing a statement in the Waltham Times about the whole sort of our take on the process, and it's intended to be sort of a collaborative post from like a dozen or so members that have all sort of contributed to it, including some of the ones that have since left the country as a result of this. So not as a result of to be clear, not as a result of this resolution specifically, but as a result of sort of the overall atmosphere created by our federal government.
Next up, also big news in terms of affordable housing production in Waltham. Um, as has been noted in previous episodes, been a while, but also through my work with Waltham Inclusive Neighborhoods, Waltham's local laws have not produced a single unit of have not permitted a single use of affordable housing in this city for about 5 or so years now. All of our affordable housing permitting production has come from the 40B process, which is a state law that says cities which don't meet affordable housing targets, such as Waltham, because they don't meet those targets, big developers can ignore local laws and build a lot of housing so long as 25% of that housing is set aside as income restricted rent capped housing. And that has resulted in a few hundred units of housing at a variety of levels of affordability, some at 50 to 60% affordability, 50 to 60% AMI, which is generally what's referred to as like truly affordable housing, and then a lot at 80% AMI as well, which is not what we normally refer to as truly affordable housing. But for all these income restricted housing types, there are very large wait lists. Most recently at the Alex in Waltham, roughly 800 applications for the, I think, like 50 to 60 affordable units available. So deep need for these affordable units. A lot of this affordable housing is being created through the 40B process. There are currently 4 applications for 40Bs in front of City Council right now, 3 of which are all in one single place in the city at Winter Street near 128. But importantly, at this week's ZBA meeting, the city is petitioning for safe harbor, meaning that they believe that they have met the requirements to no longer receive 40B applications and they are immune from this form of affordable housing production. This should not halt at the very least 3 of the 4 40Bs currently sitting in front of the ZBA for approval. However, it does look like very soon this will no longer be a way that Waltham can generate affordable housing. So it was good while it lasted. It is good while it continues to last, a lot of affordable housing production. But also importantly, it means that we are losing a source of affordable housing. We are not producing affordable housing in any other way in the city of Waltham. So it very much begs the question, looking forward, the city really needs to look inward at its zoning laws so that way we can start within our own city building affordable housing. So that way we don't cease to produce affordable housing as soon as we reach 40B safe harbor, which looks like it may happen in the next few months. So yeah, a lot of 40B development happening right now in the city of Waltham, and it looks like it is going to be ending this year. Potentially forever if Waltham meets its land coverage requirements, which is to say affordable housing exists on roughly at least 1.5% of all buildable land in the city. The city is trying to do that, in which case Waltham will be forever exempt from 40B development, or potentially just until the next 2030 census, which is when Waltham's housing count will update. And that's if Waltham instead meets its 10% threshold, meaning roughly 10% of the units in the city of Waltham are either affordable income restricted or they are market rate 40B units, because 40Bs are generally, most of the time, 75% market rate, which funds the 25% affordable housing.
If there's going to be less affordable housing being built through 40Bs, it's going to be entirely like on whatever can get fit into the existing like land use, which is unfortunate because all of the existing land use is going to be reducing the overall density for a lot of the existing housing stock.
Yeah, a big example is the development very recently at High Street, Newton Street, where what used to be 6 units of relatively affordable older housing became 4 units of the very large $1 million duplexes. So yeah, ideally with the comprehensive zoning review that's currently going on in City Council, as that continues this year, ideally we will get some changes in the local zoning code to enable that denser housing, more affordable housing, as opposed to the current local development trends, which is our zoning code dictates that all the old affordable housing, the only thing that it can be replaced with is the $1 million condos or $2 $2 million McMansions.
What is the timeline on that zoning consultancy and
Yeah, so zoning consultants were hired at the end of last year, 2024. They have been working with the city departments, gathering feedback from city employees as to what changes would be convenient to be made in the city zoning code. There was also a public hearing back in June where there was very strong attendance and support of more affordable housing in general, but also a lot of people spoke in favor of Waltham inclusive neighborhoods priorities, which are more single-family starter homes, more modest multifamily development as opposed to the $1 million condos, open space requirements that build actual green space with new development, smarter parking requirements that don't require a lot of excess parking that drive up costs and exacerbate the urban heat island effect, and also to revise our affordable housing policies, ideally put some city money behind those affordability requirements. That way, these affordable housing at the local level actually gets built.
Once this review happens, what's the action from that? Is it necessarily going to get incorporated as the review comes up with?
Yeah, so after the most recent public hearing, June, currently the consultants are working to take together all of this feedback they've acquired from the public and the city. They're going to construct it into a new zoning code. And then at the very least, the city is required to hold a public hearing on that new zoning code. The city will be able to provide it, the city's public will be able to provide its input on the new zoning code. And then it'll be up to city council whether they want to thumbs up, thumbs down, accept the new zoning or reject the new zoning. And the mayor also has veto power as well. Very hopeful, though, that whatever new zoning comes out of it will be approved, just because it would be insane for the city to waste all that money for consultants for a whole year. Not to say the city isn't wasteful. It's entirely possible, but hopefully not. This is a better chance for some good like pro-housing, pro-affordability zoning reform. This is a better chance than probably any other we'll get. So fingers are crossed.
I am worried that there is precedent for the city wasting money on consultants and not taking their advice, just thinking about like the Moody Street and all the various things like that. So
Moody Street, the previous comprehensive zoning review back in 2015, similar story, although it wasn't a full zoning code rewrite. So hopefully this is more comprehensive and better. But yeah, city has a solid track record of wasting money on consultants. And next up, a fun thing that's come of all these recent 40Bs, these mixed income housing developments, is that some of them got a little too close to some single family neighborhoods up near Lakeview. And because of that, we got some good old fashioned NIMBY talking points in the ZBA hearing, which is fun. Don't get a lot of that. Waltham's generally a very low engagement city. But it was sort of fun to see the single family homeowners show up to the ZBA and give all the reasons why they support affordable housing, just not in my backyard, just not right here. Why can't it be somewhere else, you know? But I do want to address some of those talking points, though, because they are very common, whether you live or even if you're watching this and don't live in Waltham. These are talking points that are pretty much common everywhere across the Anglosphere, and a lot of them are wrong. For one reason or another. So I just wanted to list out some of the five talking points from a recent 40B hearing that stuck out the most to me. The first one was that these apartments will cut my property value in half. So what is the city going to do to compensate me, a single family homeowner nearby, once these apartments are built and my home is worth half of what it used to be? The good news is that cut my property values in half number completely made up. The actual truth is that while new apartments do have like a supply demand effect and higher supply will lower rents citywide, it happens at a regional on a regional level and also doesn't generally spill over into property values themselves. You can see a sort of like very subtle effect from a single apartment building of a decrease of about like 1 to 2% in rent cost of rent. And there is no consistent measurable effect on property values, though.
One thing I'd also point out too is that like the whole idea of like property values thing only really happens when people are selling their home, like, and then whoever's selling it can't like make as much money as they spent on it or something like that and has to sell it for less. I mean, it's like it is in terms of like the actual like outcome of it, like it's not really making things worse for you, unless you're trying to use your home as a financial instrument instead of something to live in.
Mhm.
It's creating a situation where, like, your taxes are going to go down if your property prices go down that much, really. Like, what are you complaining about?
The second talking point was that all these apartments will worsen traffic, um, which is actually not the case for, especially for Route 128 specifically, which is near where these apartments are being built. There was a Route 128 land use and transportation study, which I like to talk about a lot, where essentially all the traffic being generated along the highway, of course, is not people living in the highway, it's cut through traffic, it's commuter traffic. And that's true for Waltham as a whole, as well as a city that has a lot more people working here than living here. The primary traffic generator is people driving through Waltham to get to their jobs and to get back home. And the most effective way to reduce traffic throughout Waltham is to give people options to drive less by either living closer to where they work or living so close to work that they don't even have to drive at all if they prefer to walk or bike or use transit. Um, so with that being said, these new housing in an area that has tons of commercial development and offices and jobs without any apartments or housing, new housing will reduce regional traffic, will reduce commute distances, reduce cut through traffic.
It's always the thing that comes out is, oh no, the traffic. Always it's the trip generation, right? So it's where if people have to get in a car to go somewhere, traffic's gonna be bad no matter what you do. And if you make
Mhm.
it super low density sprawl, it's just gonna be everywhere that's like that.
Yeah,
So the only real solution is to actually like give people options to do stuff without using a car. Suddenly no traffic. Brief aside, like it's not even healthy to have all these cars driving by where people live, like in residential areas, period. Like that's a major contributor to things like the inflammatory disease like asthma and stuff, just from inhaling all the stuff. So
100%.
it's like a health issue for people that live in the city that it's being used as a major commuting route.
The 40B development on Pond Street that's, I think, leasing now, or maybe has already had residents move in. Do you know what the parking requirements were, or how much parking was built with that?
I
The one
believe the Pond
that's
Street development had the standard 40B parking ratio, which is 1.5 parking spots for every unit,
unit. Okay.
which is more than what is required on average for apartments in the Waltham area.
And do you
Generally,
know
the
if,
actual utilization rate is about 1.2 parking spots
yeah,
per unit.
and do you
So
know
it
if
would be a lot of empty pavement.
in those units is parking bundled with rent, or do, I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot, or do renter, or is that something that renters have to pay in addition for a parking spot, whether or not they have a car?
I cannot say for certain, but the general practice for these larger apartments is that surface parking is free, garage parking is paid for and purchased, and then for all of the income restricted affordable units, the city generally requires them to be bundled with a free parking spot. Or a third talking point: new housing will overburden our schools. That is not the case. New housing generally has the effect of stabilizing school populations. Massachusetts, writ large, generally has a school depopulation problem, having problems with layoffs and needing to consolidate school districts because of their refusal to build housing is causing dwindling school attendance, requiring these layoffs and school consolidation. New housing is what stabilizes school populations, and indeed, in Waltham, even with all our housing generation, all our housing creation, comparing 2017 to today, there are 100 fewer students in our elementary school enrollment today as opposed to 8 years ago. Which is not a big dip, honestly. Waltham is staying stable because of this housing creation. It's important to continue housing creation at a healthy rate so that we can continue a constant and healthy rate of enrollment in our schools. Fourth talking point: new residential development will raise our taxes. It is actually the opposite. Apartments generally have a positive fiscal impact in Massachusetts. There was a study in, I believe, 2018 that looked at the fiscal impact on municipalities of new apartment development. And of 42 apartments built across the state, they had a net fiscal impact on their cities of $7 million, which quick max averages to about $200,000 in fiscal year 2018 net benefit to each city that had a new apartment building built. Which is to say, apartments are generally not very burdensome on infrastructure relative to single family homes. In any given city, it's generally the single family homeowners that are being subsidized by all the renters by all the commercial development and new housing, while also making housing cheaper writ large, will also result in a tax break for single family homeowners, simply because our tax code is engineered to direct all benefits, all financial benefits and tax breaks to the homeowner population, which is me. I I live here for $50 a month in property taxes. It's very inequitable, but nonetheless also leads to the fact that new housing, new dense apartment buildings are very good for any city's tax base.
Oh yeah, guilty. And again, the homeowner tax credit is just like one of the highest in the state, if not the highest in the state.
It's
in
currently
Waltham.
a $300,000 deduction from any homeowner's home value. Yeah.
Essentially, it's all the commercial or like whatever property owners that are subsidizing that, including all the apartment buildings.
And the fifth and final NIMBY talking point was that these apartments only provide housing to the wrong kind of people who aren't part of the community. That is the kind of wrong that isn't really disproven by any sort of like statistics or research. It's just morally wrong. Everyone deserves to live here. Everyone deserves to have a home. It's not good housing policy deciding who is worthy and who isn't worthy of having a home here in Waltham. Roommate housing. There's another exciting ZBA hearing happening that is not related to new housing creation. It is instead a result of the city's current crusade on trying to make it illegal for college students and graduate students to live together as roommates. Currently, there is a case before the ZBA where the city is trying to enforce against a large landlord saying, hey, you're renting to all these grad students who are brought together onto a common lease. This is too many people living together as roommates. So we are trying to shut you down. You have to evict all of these current grad student tenants. Fortunately, there is state law and protections that generally protect against this. The city is, I firmly believe, in the wrong. The city is trying to kick all of these renters out of their homes. They're trying to do it by redefining these living situations as lodging houses. But that's not the case. If you live together in a single unit on a common lease with all your roommates, that is not a lodging house. That is you living together as a quote unquote family unit, living cohesively. That has been upheld by a Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court case back in, I think, like 2013, 2014, in the city of Worcester, where the city of Worcester tried to do the exact same thing that the city of Waltham is trying to do now. And the state Supreme Court said, no, Worcester, you can't do that. People are allowed to live together as roommates. You can't just capriciously discriminate against certain kind of renters like that. So with that being said, the ZBA has not issued their decision as to whether or not folks are allowed to live together as roommates in the city of Waltham. The next public hearing for this roommate housing issue is on Tuesday, September 9th at 7 p.m. at Government Center, which is 119 School Street. Heavily encourage everyone who is interested in the ability for folks to live together as roommates, which is the most affordable way to live together in Waltham. Highly encourage folks to attend that public hearing if possible and speak in support of the ability to live together for folks to live together as roommates. Being able to split rent for like $1,000 to $1,500 each is much cheaper than having to take on the $2,000 to $3,000 leases that is generally comes with trying to rent a place on your own. Roommate housing is the way people have traditionally been able to afford to live in Waltham, especially just starting out, just out of college or in grad school. It's important to be able to maintain that here in the city.
This also feels like a continuation of the thing that they were exploring. I think it was almost 2 years ago now, about the not having like more than 3 unrelated people living together in a house that they then started enforcing under like fire code rules, I believe, or like it was like in conjunction with the fire department. They were having like the building department go.
It actually is. It actually is the exact same situation. Fire department is often how they find out about these homes, and then they enforce it through the zoning code by claiming that these living situations are lodging houses. This is the exact same situation that the city has been steamrolling through Waltham single-family neighborhoods on. This is the first time they've tried to enforce it in Waltham's multifamily neighborhoods in Southside. And the big difference this time is that this time, instead of picking off like standalone living situations, this time they ended up trying to go against a large landlord who has a lot of money on their side and thus is making a legal case against the city as opposed to rolling over. They aren't going to be shutting down their business mall and evicting their tenants just because the city said so. Uh, a very good instance of strange bedfellows.
Yeah, I mean, like normally I'd wish both of them would lose, but at this point, yeah, I think it's better that the landlord wins in that equation because like it's just a ridiculous situation that the city is going to be coming in and dictating who can live together and be like, oh, especially in like the multifamily areas, be like, oh, there's too many college kids living near these two colleges. Like what?
Yeah. What would you expect? That college has been around longer than almost everyone who lives in the city of Waltham. They've been around since the 60s or earlier, I believe. Like Waltham is a college town.
As much as people like to pretend that it isn't, I guess.
Next up on our list of things to talk about is the city's complete streets ordinance, which I believe we did give an update for earlier this year, but just in case we didn't, the city of Waltham City Council did pass an order, which is different from a ordinance or resolution, but nonetheless, the city of Waltham passed an order which established a complete streets type ordinance or policy in the city of Waltham. And basically, what it did is it laid out a framework saying, like, hey, Waltham City Council wants the city to adopt a complete streets policy. So that way, we are consistently designing street projects that enhance the safety of all users, whether they're driving, biking, or walking. And not only that, that we are also establishing that we want the mayor to form a complete streets working group that consists of city council members, city employees, community members that will work to enforce and establish the rules for this. And most importantly, the mayor of Waltham, Jeanette McCarthy, needs to sign off on this policy and submit it to the state because that is how it officially happens. We are only officially a complete streets community that is enforcing these rules and able to receive this grant money if the mayor signs off on it and does all the paperwork with the state. And I believe, as of right now, the mayor, Jeanette McCarthy, has not done those things. So with that in mind, if you have some outdated infrastructure near your house or in the Waltham that you want to have newly paved, you want the city to have access to grant money to pay for these street improvements. If you want to make sure that all these street improvements make sure that it's actually safe for pedestrians and cyclists and drivers, please do email Jeanette McCarthy and ask for updates on that. Ask her to pass this complete streets policy, ask her to sign off on it, and submit our application to the state so that we can become a complete streets community and become eligible for this grant money for street improvements.
This just feel like a continuation of sort of the classic city move of not applying for grants, even though the money's available, and just sort of talking about how great you are at managing money with the rest of the city. So
yeah, it's a shame though, because this is a really popular policy, both among constituents and among the city council. The city council did vote in favor of this unanimously. Not very common, especially when the word bike is mentioned. But the city voted for this unanimously because it's good policy with good money attached.
One example of a project not directly tied to complete streets, but where, in this case, federal funding can come in, where our neighbor Newton, it's been a long-standing project. So Washington Street in Newton, in particular, the stretch between West Newton and almost Newtonville. So it's about 0.8 miles between Chestnut Avenue and Lowell Ave. For anyone familiar with that section of Washington Street in Newton, it's always been, since the Mass Pike was constructed in the 50s or 60s, basically a four-lane effective service road, which would have created closes. It's where there are several new multi-unit buildings going up that are 40B, or at least some of them are. There's the Armory next to Trader Joe's that is being turned into housing, and then there's also a very large development just right next to that. That's 250 or 300 units that's going up. So anyway, Newton has had this vision that started about a decade ago of reimagining that street from a four-lane, basically service road flanked on one side by mostly parking lots and then the Mass Pike and the tracks on the other side into a more complete street, even if that's not the terminology that was being used. and they applied for ARPA funding back in 2023, I believe, to start a redesign of this 8/10 of a mile section of Washington Street. And if anyone goes through West Newton, you will have definitely noticed that change. Um, Construction started about 2 months ago, beginning of the summer. It's a quick build project, meaning there's no permanent concrete being poured. It's all pretty much modular construction. So curb cut, like precast curbs to make a shared use path on the side of the pike, planters, restriping lines, reducing it from 4 lanes to 2 lanes with a turning lane. And I happen to bike along there often, just coming back from Newtonville to home, taking the train, and Newton does have its um, uh, set of residents that, just like in Waltham, that are very opposed to this. It's like, what are you doing to our street? You're turning it into a city. But I'm personally very pleased with it. I'll just um, share my screen. You can see what the project looks like. So this is the project page. This is kind of the cross section near Trader Joe's. The whole project was around 2.8, under $3 million. I think there's a breakdown of the funding. Yeah, $2.8 million. The large share of that coming from federal funds. Um, and then Dunstan East is that large development that's near Trader Joe's. But just as an example, kind of at a larger scale of when a city does have people in charge that do have a grand vision of things, a project that can come to fruition. It has taken a long time. There's a lot of public input involved in this, in the layout, but construction pretty much is done with this. So if anyone does pass through West Newton or Newtonville, something you will notice.
It's a really nice street redesign, a lot safer to bike on. The traffic still flows. And that is the kind of thing where, like, if Waltham has a complete streets working group, not only will they have money to implement these kind of policies, but we also have a group that is responsible for making sure we do consider these types of policies and these types of street redesigns in the first place. Because I would love to
Yeah,
have something like that in Waltham.
yeah, it's unfortunate that under our current administration, I don't think we have the know-how to pull off a project like this currently. Um, we have the know-how to do projects like the Piety Corner, Taunton Pond Road, Baker Street, Lexington Street redesign, but that basically still left it as exactly it was, just realigned some streets, but there was no complete streets aspect. There was no extra pedestrian or bike accommodation. Um,
I think they net added one slip lane or something.
we may have added asphalt to that intersection. Um,
Washington Street has much improved, I will say, from that. And it would be nice if Waltham could pull something like that off.
yeah, there were definite relatively similar length of streets where we could have similar kind of treatment. I mean, just Lexington Street between the rail trail and the high school is about a mile, so slightly longer than the length of this project. Um, Main Street between Linden Street and the Watertown line is also about a mile, give or take, where it's currently just same 4 lanes. There's very little traffic that warrants 4 lanes with a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit, lined with homes. Like there's no commercial at all on that stretch, pretty much between the Linden Street, or sorry, the bridge over the tracks at Linden Street um, and the Watertown line. So yeah, there are sections of streets where we can definitely uh, do projects like this, but again, I don't think we have the leadership or the know-how to pull this all together right now.
And I think one of the sticking points is that it's going to involve citizens on this, like whatever board ends up being formed. And like that would mean that there's people that aren't the city that are directly appointed by the mayor that are having input on how things are done. I feel like that's going to be the ultimate sticking point.
And last but not least, we do have a city municipal election this year. It is very calm as far as city elections go. We have a contested councilor at large race with 5 incumbents, Stanley dropping out to focus on his state rep position. So we have 5 incumbents, 1 open seat. and vying for that one open seat, plus maybe booting out some of the incumbents. We have 4 challengers. We have Emma Zumas, we have Tim King, we have Christina Curtin, and we have Richard Hines. There is also a contested school committee race where one of the incumbents has also chosen to step down. So meaning there's 2 incumbents, 1 open spot, and then fighting for that open spot / maybe booting out an incumbent are dual language school parent Sabrina De Joannis and dual language school parent Tammy Wong Bigelow. So this is very exciting. Guaranteed to have a dual language school parent on school committee. Guaranteed to have a new school committee counselor. Guaranteed to have a new school committee member. Guaranteed to have a new counselor at large. However, there are 0 challengers for any of the ward counselor races, and mayor is not up for re-election this year. So relative to other elections, very quiet, but the election is this year on November 4th. The deadline to register to vote is October 25th. So please, if you're not already registered to vote, register now. Make sure to request your mail-in ballot if that's how you prefer to vote. And please do vote. I know personally I'll be voting for both of the school committee challengers. Excited to have a dual language school parent on school committee. And I will definitely be voting for Emma Zumas, who I'm working on the campaign for. She is a wonderfully intelligent public health professional, parent of 2 who are in the public schools. Wonderful, bright person. Excited for her to be on city council at large. And also, of course, Colleen Bradley MacArthur, who is the one good incumbent who at large, who really just holds it down, speaking for progressive values in a city whose leadership sadly lacks it relative to the city's population at large.
I got to second your recommendations though, Tom. It would be good to see a dual language school represented on school committee. And Emma Zumas looks excellent, and I hope that she joins Colleen Bradley MacArthur on there.
And generally, we've talked about this before, the strategy for voting for both school committee at large, where there's 3 spots, sort of like jungle competition to see who gets those available spots. There are 2 strategies really. If you're really passionate about a certain number of contenders, vote for those people and no one else. So that way you avoid the risk of them being butted out by maybe your second or third choice. Whereas if you're really voting against someone, vote for everyone except that person. I generally like to have a positive view of politics, meaning like I'm really excited to vote for Emma Zumas. I am very excited to vote for Colleen Bradley MacArthur. And I'm thinking I'm getting perhaps a little excited to vote for Christina Curtin as well. So I'll likely be voting for those 3 and none others. Yeah, that's the strategy. That's the news about city council elections. Kind of boring, but still happening. So make sure you vote. And that's, I think, all for today. Thank you so much for watching.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.